Medotam Rera Blingshin Inde Gambani Sangye Shindu Mente Uani Nugu Namda Shina Chabasho Inam Guru Radhamandala Kamya Dayani Sangye Chadam Sogi Chonamha Chanchu Bhadu Dani Kyapsushi Dagi Chushe Gipe Sanamgi Lola Penchu Sangye Dubasho Sangye Chadam Sogi Chonamha Chanchu Bhadu Dani Kyapsushi Dagi Chushe Gipe Sanamgi Lola Penchu Sangye Dubasho Sangye Chadam Sogi Chonamla Chanchu Bhadu Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Chushe Gipe Sanamgi Lola Penchu Sangye Dubasho.
가서 대도 가리면은 도디 공대는 시비 다 가리면은 장년 진수 들어봐 다 쇼니 시 랑가니 시 도디 공대는 시비라 장년 진수디 와 그만 말고 그거도 쓴다는 거 다마지 바라가
everybody, I'm sure you all know, but I'll just repeat a little bit that we are in the mind-only section of the two ways of explaining what is literal and what is figurative. And we looked at a quotation from the Buddha's own explanation of what he meant when he taught the sutras. And so we're in that division now of the two different ways of doing it. We're in the mind-only division. Just to repeat, we started yesterday afternoon from page 8, line 6, where it says Kanda Shochin La Sopedo.
공기 다 군지 전화만 거란기 다 가르쳐 버려. 말하면 딱딱 같이 다 가르쳐. 내든지 돌아 캔렌 주는 아주 도주 시험이 살아요. 도주 시험에 다 거란기 좀씩 빼자 끝나는 내든 자소스 되게. 거란은 주다이 도주지 알아 보통씩 내든 자소스 진짜 거란 좀씩 빼지지 이러셔. 그게 도움은. 디나라 탄디 탄다 디 카도 되라. 진내 내가 송나랬어. 디 송한테 다 정말로 동거를 치면 결혼기 디 송단디 지금 이렇게 송거 했어. 어디 권한다 강다 시진의 소로 또 남다 세디 아니 근데 지금 그 아니 현다 지금 몇 바지 이거 바지 비슷한다. 디 콘데 정말로 동거를 치면 될 지금
There was a very great scholar in Tibet named Jonangwa who came before Jetsun Kapa, or contemporary I think maybe. But he spent many years studying the question of what was literal and what was figurative. And then he composed a book called Ngeden Gyatso, which means the ocean of the real meaning, or the literal meaning. And Geshe says that at this point in the text, page 8, line 6, that Jetsun Kapa is slightly criticizing a viewpoint of Jonangwa. Jonangwa was a very great scholar, especially in Tantra. Geshe says he believes that Jonangwa was responsible for translating some of the Kala Chakra Sanskrit texts into Tibetan. So no doubt he was a great scholar, but on this point, concerning what was literal, what was figurative, on this particular point, Jetsun Kapa is addressing a misperception by Jonangwa. And still there are people who are practicing this Jonangwa. Okay.
어디네. 타디도 가르친 거라서 그 전함네 알아도 콜로 바르바르 다 진디 주송이. 진디 주송이 나라 태연 담방 원님이 소야. 다 태연 담방 원님이 태연 담방 랑이 생이마. 다 원님이 계산하네. 원님이 세도 거야 랑이 생이 좀 매봐. 원이 유스나 랑이 생이 좀 여발 고주세. 원님이 세 랑이 생이 좀 매발 고주라. 에 어디다 다 랑이 생이 태연 담방 원이 매봐. 세도 태연 담방 랑이 생이 뭐 좀 봐서. 요 콜로 밥에나 송나와 봤어. 송사이 최고 타마에 송사 가르라 송아를 가라서나 까와 봄바시마 지금 송사이 최되나나 군속 대비 리카즈는 코도 강가로라 된다 뭐니면 송요아를 막 송이 리카이면 된다 대비 리지아로 또 제가 된다 뭐니면 봐도 송요 말에 신이 송요 다 그이 전함 대장으로 뭐 동아 일단 드려 말이에요.
The position expressed by Jonangwa, which they call the omniscient Jonangwa, was that when the three versions of the Prajnaparamita, there's a longer version, a medium version, and a shorter version. And when they are talking about those three during the second turning of the wheel, which we call the middle turning of the wheel, then remember that the Buddha was constantly saying things didn't exist by definition. Things didn't exist from their own side. And he said, remember that I've told you that throughout this book now, when they say things have no nature of their own, they're going to be referring to the statement in the middle turning of the wheel where the Buddha said things don't exist by definition. The things don't exist through any characteristics of their own. And so when Jonangwa was explaining that or thinking about it, he said, it seems to me that Lord Buddha is saying that he adds the word ultimately. So he says, Dun Dambango Nyimepa means ultimately nothing has any nature of its own. Ultimately nothing exists by definition. So he says when the Buddha adds that ultimately, the Buddha is restricting, the Buddha is saying that it's only what we call the deceptive reality around us, the normal objects around us, that he's talking about when he says things don't have any nature of their own. And Jonangwa's take on it is that the Buddha wasn't saying that about emptiness itself. So according to Jonangwa, emptiness itself wasn't what the Buddha was talking about when the Buddha said nothing had its own nature or nothing exists by definition. He says because the Buddha said ultimately, then the Buddha was speaking about the normal objects around us, which we call deceptive reality, and he wasn't talking about emptiness itself as being something that didn't have any nature of its own. That was Jonangwa's position, and then Jetson Kapa is addressing that misperception here.
Yes. 담아 원님에 봐 송사고라 돈이 리기단 마샤라 미샤데 가르서는 샘담이 룰을 제나야 저랑 티산 차딩 꼬마를 룰을 제나 짠 차딩
Jetson Kapa is telling Jonangwa, not only are you wrong, you're wrong with regard to both the mind-only position and you're wrong with regard to the Madhyamika, the middle way position. So either way you take it, even if we just say we're going to stick to the mind-only position, you're still wrong when you say that, and then much less during the middle way position. So you're wrong on both positions.
Okay. 사고라 가르친 거 지나 송도가 담이 휴제바들이 다 근데 호랑 때문에 이제 전화미 시에 콜라 테리 저러 민노 시에 쳐반이 공대다 게 도대 공대 찍게
나서
샘샘 루시샤샤
나네
도대 공대도 찍게 하고 통미 꾸지기 흉다 그래서는 파바 통미기 흉다 그 샘샘 흉다는 게 로베 이니기 흉다 게 도대 신신 디바둘라 샘샘 흉다 게 루치야 그래서
then in the next lines where it starts out Dindambala Gombayin Minos, and then it says Gondel. All of that means when you, Jonamba, say that that description that things don't have their own nature doesn't apply to ultimate reality, you're wrong. And then Jetson Kapa starts saying, you're wrong according to this scripture, this scripture, this scripture, all mind-only scriptures. So he's saying, you're even wrong just with regard to the mind-only school, much less with regard to the middle way school. So he says, you contradict Dode Gongdel, which is the Buddha's own explanation of what he meant in the sutras. You contradict the writings of Master Sangha, and you contradict the writings of Master Vasubandhu on these points. So you're already in hot water when you say that, even if we're just restricting ourselves to the mind-only school.
다 가르서는 도대 공대다 결당고 가르서는 도대 공대에 나라 숨디서 가르서는 홀로 봐발래 최탐지라는 팀이 맞죠 숨을 알아 송바티 공바 시에서 가르라 공하는데는 시왕다 용도 군다서 송송도 용도로 공도 왔어. 대대대 용도로 공도 왔으니 도대 공대 비상되는 상황인 거야. 얘를 시켜라 지켜야다.
Then Jetsun Kappa is going to attack him in this way. He's going to say, let's just stick to the mind-only school, okay? And you are contradicting the Buddha's explanation of what he meant in the sutras, because you are refusing that the words, they don't have any nature of their own, applies to all three attributes that are taught by the mind-only school. Remember, we had three attributes taught by the mind-only school. So he says, don't forget the three attributes. They are dependency, meaning things that depend on other things, which are the normal objects around us. And then there are nominal stuff. And then remember there was, what do we call it, total existence or something like that. The third one, remember, referred to emptiness itself. So don't forget that the Buddha, in the second turning of the wheel, said that all three characteristics are empty or don't have any nature of their own. So the Buddha said about the characteristic called total existence, which refers to emptiness, that it didn't have any nature of its own. So you're contradicting the Buddha's own sutra, where the Buddha says all three characteristics don't have any nature of their own. And one of the characteristics is total existence, which refers to emptiness, so you're wrong. And Geshe says, if you want to see a direct quotation from that sutra, where the Buddha is explaining what he meant in the sutras, you can just turn to page 7. And there's one of those quotations, and it's down there about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines from the bottom. And he says, remember he said, oh, Bodhisattva, and he referred to him with his name. And then he said, things have no nature of having their characteristics, things have no nature of having started, and things have no nature of being ultimate. And that third one means the emptiness of things itself doesn't have a nature. The third attribute of what we call total existence doesn't have a nature of its own. So in that quotation alone, Geshe says, on the page before, from that book by the Buddha, he states that emptiness itself doesn't have a nature of its own. So what are you talking about, Janama? Okay. We'll get more on that later. I'm just giving you a little brief description of it, but of course it's going to come more later on the same point. On page 13, the more detailed explanation of this point begins. And he's not going to go there now, I don't think, but he just wants you to know that's where it starts. 7 lines from the bottom, on page 13. And that's a direct quotation from Dode Gongdel, from the Buddha's explanation of what he meant in the sutras, that says, moreover, the attribute that we call total existence doesn't have any nature of its own either. So that's another quotation directly from Lord Buddha that refutes the idea of Jonangma. The explanation before, that we just talked about before, is what is the shorter one, and this is where we consider this the longer one and the more detailed one, and there'll be a more detailed explanation of this point coming up on page 13. I'm just giving you a rough out of this point, and later on you're going to get hit with it big time. Okay. And then when Jetsokapa goes on to say, not only do you contradict this sutra where the Buddha explained what he meant in the sutras, you're also contradicting the two brothers, right? Which is Master Sangha and Master Vasubandhu. And then Geshe says, if you want to see how he contradicts Master Sangha, you can just go back to page 7, look at the last line, where it says, Namshe Dua Dirwa, Namshe Dua. Namshe Dua. Nasa. Nasa. Master Sangha wrote this is called thus summary, and I was just wondering which thus summary it was. And Master Sangha wrote a couple of thus summaries, and he says he thinks it's a certain one. And then it says, nothing. So here's Master Asanga saying, remember what he said yesterday? He said, what did the Buddha mean? If you ask me, if you come and ask me, what did the Buddha mean when he said that no existing phenomenon has any nature of its own? Mepa, I'll tell you. What is it? Due to the needs of the disciples, the Buddha taught 3 lacks of self-existence or self-nature. And he said that 3 different things don't have any self-nature. As you know, he's referring to the 3 characteristics or attributes of the mind-only school. As you know, total existence is in there. And as you know, total existence refers to emptiness. So the Buddha said, according to Master Sangha, that emptiness doesn't have its own nature. So you contradict Master Sangha right there. You're also contradicting Master Vasubandhu. You can get a quotation on page 8, line 3, from his 30 verses, where he says, look, what did the Buddha have in mind when he said there wasn't any nature? He had in mind that there wasn't any of those 3 natures, meaning the self-existent nature of the 3 attributes. As you know, one of the attributes is emptiness. And so you're also contradicting Master Vasubandhu. So there's a proof that you're contradicting the Buddha, Master Sangha, and Master Vasubandhu. So we've demonstrated quite thoroughly that you contradict the entire teachings of the mind-only school, and we finished that. Now let's go on to the middle way school. Let's prove that you are contradicting that. This is a no-brainer. In the middle turning of the wheel, the middle turning of the wheel, the Buddha directly said, everything. This is Madhyamika people speaking, right? He said directly, everything from physical matter on up to everything doesn't have any nature of its own. Whether you say it doesn't exist by definition, or whether you say it doesn't exist ultimately by definition, it all boils down to the same thing. And when you say all existing phenomena, starting with physical matter on up to everything else, of course emptiness itself is in there. So you contradict the Madhyamika schools also when you say that the Buddha didn't mean to say that emptiness itself didn't have an ultimate nature. Sixth line from the bottom, and there begins a discussion of how did the Buddha teach that nothing had a nature of its own in the second turning of the wheel, in the middle turning of the wheel. And he went through he could have gone through all the categories of everything that existed. He could have gone through every single category of all the things that exist in the universe and say, this doesn't exist by definition, this doesn't exist by definition, this doesn't have a nature of its own, this doesn't have a nature of its own. And he could have gone through all the different classifications of all the things that exist in the world. There's no time to do that. Okay, I mean, he couldn't sit there and go through everything that existed in the universe and say about each thing, describe about each thing how it didn't have any nature of its own. So tab kepa chene, with skillful means, the Buddha chose to classify everything into three groups. If you could say this group number 1, group number 2, group number 3, they don't have any nature of their own, then that would be a very skillful way by Lord Buddha to summarize every existing object, and he wouldn't have to go into the lack of self-nature of every existing object. So, in a very skillful way, Lord Buddha has chosen or described these three attributes, right? Which means things that depend on the power of other things, things that, what we call total existence or empty things, and then all the other unchanging things, which refers to what we call nominal stuff, right? So very skillfully the Buddha has chosen these three categories or these three attributes and has demonstrated that each of these three doesn't have their own nature, and that gets him out of having to spend his whole eternity trying to explain the emptiness of every single object in the universe.
mi ingela ani sem meba se suche ma america milaya meke yo mare daga milaya sem meke se so ni yo sheba meke pepe milaya sheba meke ji yo mare lamjana riksum la dini she yo de sa tini kangala america mi inse kangalo la sem yo gen jang jang sheba re she ma do america mi ki america de mi de la duwa se ni lo to she sheba de sem yo sheba de la sem jana america mi lo zoya sa ne ti khadu de dan na america mi in chin jala sem meke sheba meke so ni yo chi 아메리카 미인데 강가로라 생각하고 탁지고 계단 가보지 산지 좀 되지 오 콜로 밥에 나는 저 탕질라랑 생이 마주로 숨 맞고 되게 수루 신이 샤와요 군다 숨이 나라 마디게 이체 매바 이 고소 숨라 대한 담랑 생이 메주지 현용 배를 보고하디 배대단 가고 숨
for example, if we wanted to go about proving that there wasn't any human being in the world that didn't have a mind, okay, so we could go to America and pick out people one by one and stand them in lines. They stand in line, and pick the first guy out. You stand here, look, this guy is not a person that doesn't have a mind. He's a person that doesn't have a mind. Okay, now you go. Now second guy come, and you prove that guy has a mind, and you say, look, he's not a person that doesn't have a mind. And you say, okay, and then you could go through the whole population of the United States that way. It would be a little inconvenient. And then you'd have to do Tibet, and then you'd have to do India, for example. So it'd be like these three nations of people that you have to go one by one through them and demonstrate that each guy such that they don't not have a mind, right? But it'd be a lot easier just to sit there and say, nobody among the whole American population doesn't have a mind. Nobody among the Indian population doesn't have a mind. Nobody among the Tibetan population doesn't have a mind. And in this way, with three simple phrases, the population of America, population of Tibet, population of India, you can cover all the existing human beings of those three countries. And then you'd say about those three, none of them is such that they don't have a mind, to prove that they all do have a mind. So it's the same thing with proving that things don't have any nature of their own. You can just say, look, those three categories of things, okay, things that depend on others, things that are empty, and then things that are, nominal stuff, right? You could just divide it into these three categories and say, everything in those three categories, or nothing in those three categories has any nature of its own. You've covered everything. So it's a very similar example. So, we can just summarize it in a very simple way. Don't forget that we are in the mind-only school. We're talking about from the mind-only viewpoint. During the second turning of the wheel, the Buddha was speaking about the emptiness of three different, or the lack of self-nature of three different categories. And in there, is there a category of emptiness? And did the Buddha teach, do you guys think, that emptiness itself didn't have any nature of its own? Of course. Yeah. He says, let's hear an answer here. Yom du Quran on the Angoni Mebachi Sunyon. That's a dupe side.
Tanju, Umabilola channel, the Yin Gangalola, the Dembarma, Tandamarangi, Matu, but the Rangi, Matu,
And as you guys can easily grasp, in the in the middle way school, they just say, look, in the secretary of the wheel, Buddha said everything from physical matter up to everything is such that it doesn't have its own nature. So automatically you get emptiness covered in there, and obviously the Buddha taught that. He said all existing phenomena, emptiness is going to be included in there. There's no big deal about the mind-only school believing that the Buddha did teach that emptiness itself doesn't have a self-nature. So the Buddha, we say that the Buddha in the secretary of the wheel went through a bunch of different categories. He did describe a lot of categories. He went through like 108 different categories. He spoke about 18 distinct different kinds of emptiness. And so he did go through all these categories. He did speak all of that. Obviously, if he talked about 108 different kinds of existing phenomena, and obviously if he treated 18 different kinds of emptiness, then I guess he was talking about emptiness when he described that things didn't have a self-nature. So I can't imagine who, with any kind of brain, would say that the emptiness itself was such that it didn't have a nature of its own. And Geshe says, we just proved that everybody had a brain, but Jetsun Kappa is seeing here that anybody with a brain could understand that. He seems to be implying that Jonangwan maybe didn't have a brain, but we have to agree that Jonangwan did have a brain. So probably when he said anyone with a brain could understand that, he was probably meaning that he didn't have the brains to think about this when he was talking like that. There's a new expression going around the monastery nowadays called Tsamme means like no spinal cord or no brain matter, no gray matter. They call them grayless, meaning no gray matter. And but it's not really literal. People do have some gray matter. There's a lot of new expressions coming around the monastery, especially, people come from Tibet, new refugees come to Tibet, and they don't know any Hindi yet, so, people are talking about them. They use Hindi nicknames for them, and one is kacha. Kacha means, Gen says, that means like a fruit that's not ripe yet, meaning they're tender, what do you call it, tender feet, newcomers. So they call them, oh, hey, kacha, kacha, kacha. And they don't know what language it is, and they don't know what it means. But that's how you get, new words floating around the monastery. It's kind of like that, brainless, grayless, like that. Just joking. Nothing.
니바 제가 시작하는데 다 얘기도 로로 거기를 되게 숨 쉬어요. 그러면 다 거기 양조 세야래요. 시직 바로 다 내려만 세야래요.
Now we're going to get to the seventh line from the bottom of page 9, which is a new category. It's category number 2, which says a more detailed explanation. And here, although the subject matter and the points are going to be the same as before, there's going to be a little more detail on them now.
가디나는 뭐니 매바 숨수 되게 걸 얘기했잖아. 생이 뭐니 매바 사람만도 생이 뭐니 매바 실사고 수인디 다 세버랑 숨나 말이 딱 되나. 경험 뭐니 매바 숨잘. 경험 뭐니 매바 실사고 수인디 시라요. 경험 뭐니 미수 가리 하고야 말이 세버 숨나 말이. 전다 뭐니 매송아마도 전다 뭐니 매사 매스랍사 수인당 홀 전다 뭐니 주제로 딱 들어 세버 숨나 말이. 다 시네 니마 기니 뭐지 체닝 원이 매 시에 고 체닝 원이 매비 주제 직시에 체닝 원이 스사고 수레 어때 주제 맞아 제 언제도 알리 체닝 원이 매비 주제 시에가래 당대 당번데
you know, in the actual quotation from the sutra where the Buddha explains his own sutras, the intent of his own sutras, he doesn't really give the name of the 3 attributes that the mind-only school follows very clearly. He just says there's no nature to the characteristics of things, there's no nature to the beginning of things, and there's no nature to the ultimate. That's all he says. He doesn't clearly state what it is that doesn't have a characteristic, how it is they don't have a characteristic, what it is that doesn't start, what it is that how it doesn't start. He doesn't get into that. So Jetsun Kapa's point here in this next section is how do we explain the actual wording, which is kind of obscure, where the Buddha says things don't have any characteristics, things don't have any beginning or starting, and things don't have any ultimate. There's no ultimate. You know, what is he? Those 3 things don't have any nature of their own, which is actually referring to the 3 attributes of the mind-only school, but he doesn't say those. He doesn't use that exact wording. So Jetsun Kapa is going to go through and explain to you, particularly in the first case, what is it that doesn't have a characteristic? How is it that it doesn't have a characteristic? So he's going to go into that detail now.
지난길이 대노 호랑 산지 좀 되는 호랑 얘기가 더 되고 참 믿는 많이 다 제시 도저 공대 나면 세고 싫어요. 누인다.
He says actually Lord Buddha himself later on in his own sutra explains what he meant by those 3 expressions. So the sutra itself is brief in the case that we already had, and the sutra itself is going to help explain what the sutra meant further down in the sutra itself. So now we're going to get sort of a longer explanation not only by Jetsun Kapa but in the sutra itself.
산지 좀 되는 호랑 제부 수 홀수 그팀 콜라 장원라 어떤 거지 안 좋다 신디 직접 안 좋게 예부시 전다 지가 다 가지 깨져 시딩이 So
if you think about it, we're going to go now into 2 different discussions. One is going to be the sutra itself, explaining in more detail what the sutra itself said, and then you're going to have Jetsun Kapa, based on that explanation by the sutra, giving you a further clarification of what the sutra means when it explains in more detail what the sutra meant when it made those briefer statements. I left something out on that last explanation, and I want to go back and just insert something here.
나란도지는 홀 따사리 땅에 집다벨 그에는 그 미코스 민시비 라지 민글람 소소뱅아 시비 라비 삼데 리퀴 이제 민지를 뭐 숨에 있고 약간 빈데지 미리 빈데지 지금 세고 시비지는 지원 땅들 봐. 네네. 그거는 통화도 근데 싸이네 지원 땅. 근데 이도 분지 전화. 네네. 그냥 강다 티kin라 소리 또 남네. 이 가시지 근데 시기 알아. 그러면 분지 전화 무슨 싸이니 그 제일 빠지네. There's a particular unique characteristic of the way that Jetsun Kapa approached his writing and his teaching. When he wanted to, if you and I were going to try to refute
the ideas of a person that was living in our time or around these days, we would say, so-and-so living in such and such a country, at such and such an address, whose name is like such and such, has got this stupid idea, and then we would say, he's wrong on that, he's wrong on that, he's wrong on that, he's really stupid, I'm really great, I got this really good idea, here's what I think, and it would be a very personal confrontation in a sense. But Jetsun Kappa says Jetsun Kappa's style wasn't like that. How does he treat the omniscient? He's called the omniscient Nage. And Jetsun Kappa doesn't approach things like that. He says, he doesn't say, oh, the omniscient Jonama thinks that. He says, well, a couple of people have expressed the idea that, blah, blah, blah. And then he sort of, then he undertakes to tear it apart. But he doesn't directly state in this text that he's talking about the omniscient Jonama. He's just saying, well, some people say that, and that's very much Jetsun Kappa's style. He does not attack the person, he's attacking the idea. And then saying, well, some people are saying that, like that. There are really two reasons why Jetsun Kappa doesn't choose to name the person whose idea he's attacking. The first reason why Jetsun Kappa doesn't choose to name the person who has these ideas directly is an indication that Jetsun Kappa himself possesses the three fine spiritual qualities that we call wisdom, holiness, and purity, Ketsung Sansum. And it's to indicate particularly that he has the second quality, which is called holiness, meaning he doesn't want to get into, he wants to avoid the implication that he is this big guy and the other guy is this little guy, and that he is this great scholar and the other guy doesn't know anything, and that he's up here and he's down there. And he doesn't, out of respect for his morality, out of respect for his own morality, he doesn't want to get into a situation where he's putting himself up and putting the other guy down. He wants to avoid that. So the first reason why Jetsun Kappa doesn't name the other person is that he wants to stick to his vows. And his vows require him not to get into a situation where he's like criticizing or talking down to somebody. He wants to show that this is an indication of Jetsun Kappa's moral purity, moral, what do you call it? Holiness, really, in Tibetan.
Tawe chola ngaro to tawa da chopa ni ki na ne ra tawe chola de ji ta pona dim ha kin be so ro che ye ta jang lo ma dong lo ji kho se shi mi se se wo che ne tawe cho de be se wo che ne sa sa jin su ma ma to de che be cho chang ju ji sem da ning ji da nge jung se de so ma do kun ji chona ma zo be sa ni mi ja ba xiang dan ji chang ji dan ji yin za de be ma ra do che be cho de la 그 가와진 사람들 대략 3미터 같은 친구 정도 동가 맞죠? 기존 차비지에 공부 시비나 하는데 이 전에 같은 테마 사람들 기초도에 제일 무슨 말이야.
The second reason why Jetsun Kappa doesn't mention omniscient Jonangwan by name is that he wants to acknowledge that the spread of Buddhism in Tibet is due entirely to the kindness of these great lamas who came before, and the omniscient Jonangwa is an example of one of those great lamas who came before Jetsun Kappa and helped spread Buddhism throughout Tibet. If you look at a person's spiritual life, you can divide it into their worldview and into their activities. And from the point of view of their activities, meaning their bodhicitta, their feelings of renunciation, their compassion for others, that omniscient Jonangwa and other lamas who have come before Jetsun Kappa had perfect love, perfect compassion. They were incredible bodhisattvas. And so Jetsun Kappa doesn't want to in any way imply that they didn't make some incredible, extraordinary, beautiful contribution to the spread of Buddhism in Tibet. He doesn't want to say anything to them. He doesn't want to name them directly because he doesn't want anyone to think that he doesn't appreciate or that he doesn't understand how much their love and compassion and teachings on bodhicitta have caused the spread of Buddhism in Tibet. But on the other hand, from the point of view of their worldview, how they understood emptiness, how they understood those subjects, he says Jetsun Kapa's mission was to clarify things that they actually didn't quite grasp correctly. So he's not attacking omniscient Jonama directly by name for that reason, but he is trying very with great effort to clarify the view, the worldview, especially the understanding of emptiness of these lamas who came before, that it wasn't very clear, or it wasn't expressed very clearly about emptiness. And that's his mission. So that's another second reason why he doesn't mention the omniscient Jonama by name. That was a little digression, and now we're jumping forward again. So don't think now I'm going to jump to the other subject, so don't think that's what I just said is part of the new subject. We're at the fourth line from the bottom of page 9. Jetsun Kapa is going to explain what the Buddha meant when he spoke about the first group of things that didn't have any nature of its own. If you remember, the Tibetan word can mean either definition or characteristic. So when the Buddha said nothing has any nature of having any characteristics of its own, what did Lord Buddha mean? He's referring, of course, to the first attribute or category described by the mind-only school. So the Buddha himself, in the sutra where he explains what he meant when he taught the sutras, says, now he goes on, after saying that things don't have any nature or have any characteristic of their own, he goes on to say, and what did I mean when I say that things didn't have any nature of having any characteristics of their own? When I talk about characteristics or by definition, the word that I'm referring to is kuntak, meaning we've been translating as nominal stuff, things which are just nominal. Remember, it refers to unchanging things after you take out emptiness. Okay. So now that we know what it was he was talking about when he said that things didn't have any characteristics, any nature of having any characteristics, and now that we know that he was talking about the fact that things which are nominal don't have any nature of their own, now that we've established the thing it is that doesn't have any nature of its own, when you talk about characteristics not having any nature of their own, now we can go on to explain how it is that they don't have any nature of their own. And we're going to do so in two modes. There'll be the negative mode where we're trying to refute something about it, we're trying to prove something that it doesn't have or something that's not true about it, and then we'll go into a positive mode where we try to establish something about it in a positive way. So here goes the sutra explaining why things don't have any nature of having any characteristics of their own, which refers to nominal stuff. First we'll talk about what he means in a negative way, and then we'll talk about what he means in a positive way. This is now out of the negative one and the positive one, he actually treats the positive one first. So he says, what is the nature of things that are nominal, meaning in the mind-only school referring to things which are unchanging but are not, right? it refers to the things which are only established through imagination, only established through mental pictures. Okay, so things which are established that way, we can say when we say things that are nominal, things that have characteristic or don't have some characteristic, we're talking about things that are imaginary or things that mainly depend on us picturing them.
어디? 다 각조는 파 말에 시야 콜라 가르잖아. 여기 콜라 체니 뭐냐 봐만도 랑팅 주 시야가 되어 말스 땡 가라. 다 계신 걸 랑기 체니 진나 봤네 봐니 마임베 디집 되는 체니 뭐니 제셔. 어디 소. 랑 체니 말에 마강에
And now comes the negative side where Lord Buddha says, okay, from a positive standpoint, these things exist through conceptualization, let's say. But these things don't exist through any nature of their own or through any, by definition. So he's going on to say that. So we finished the positive way to say it is, these things exist through some kind of conceptualization. The negative way to say it is that these things don't have any nature of their own or they don't exist by definition. So here, Lord Buddha has for the first time used the actual wording, don't exist by definition. Before he just said by their own characteristic or something. So here he's used the actual word, they don't exist by definition.
Okay. Tati 계제도 좀 되고 생각하라서 다른 나신 시에서는 그렇잖아. 다양 그거 그랬어. 나 최시. 생이 뭐니면 봐 인데. 또배 따와 좀 인치 랑기 생이 주고. 많이데. 다 돼.
So if we express this, we go back to, elementary logic, Dagrik, and and so it's good for you guys because you studied it this year. So he says, we'll go back, we'll make a classical logical statement, and I'll express it that way. So we say, what's the churchen? Is a gunda churchen, meaning nominal stuff. Let's take the things that are called nominal. They are what the Buddha referred to in the brief section as things that don't have any nature of their own with regard to their characteristics, because, and now we get the Dayandak, the correct reason. And then the correct reason is going to be divided into a positive half and negative half, because they are only creations of our concepts, A, in a positive way, and then B, and because they don't have any nature of their own by definition. And that would be the negative expression of that. So that would be, in a logical statement, you'd say, consider all nominal stuff. It doesn't have what the Buddha said, any nature of having characteristic of their, any nature of having characteristics. Why? Because A, they are products of our concepts, and B, they are not such that they exist by definition.
Okay. 탄디 찍대라. 탄다 도대 본데 찍지 산지 좀 되지 찍대라. 다 장걸로 또 뭐 심네. 다 찍디 대화디 찍용 거 인간이 받는도.
인간이 받는 거. And then from the second line of page 10, Jetsun-Kapa is undertaking to give an explanation of the Buddha's own detailed explanation of what he meant. So now we're getting Jetsun-Kapa's take on the Buddha's explanation of what he meant in that very brief phrase.
가르침도서는 책 방법이 있어요. 굉장히 받고 책 방법이 질량이 군다 트레이닝 뭐니면 바로 시에는 대지지를 시에는 시에바 시에베 디 유제고 티리 랜도 각종의 랑기 트레이닝 맞아 맞아 두조네 민다 다 내셔도 유제 수는
So now this is Jetsun-Kapa's explanation, which is kind of a more detailed explanation of what the Buddha meant when he gave that positive explanation and then that negative explanation. So Jetsun-Kapa says, why is it that the Buddha says that nothing has any nature of having characteristics of its own? He says, in reply to that question, Lord Buddha is saying, what I meant when I said that was, from a negative point of view, nothing exists by definition, nothing exists through its own characteristics, and from a positive point of view, all things are just creations of your labels and your concepts, and that's what the Buddha is saying here. Jetsun-Kapa says the first two lines are teaching that. Now we got to go back and find those first two lines, okay? No, sir. When Jetsun-Kapa on page 10, line 2 at the end says the first two lines, ... he's referring to page 9, fourth line from the bottom at the end, I'm sorry, third line from the bottom, where it says, the Buddha himself says, what do I mean when I say that nothing has any nature of having any characteristics of its own? I'll tell you what I mean. I mean that those things which are only exist nominally don't have any characteristics of their own or don't exist by definition. So those are the two lines that Je Tsongkhapa is talking about when he says, by the way, the meaning of the first two lines can be explained in a positive way, a negative way, and he goes into that explanation. Okay. These are a question posed to the, it's a rhetorical question by the Buddha and an answer by the Buddha in which he indicates that that category accepted by the mind-only school called things that exist nominally is explained as having no nature by definition or not having any nature of its own. So Je Tsongkhapa is reporting a second rhetorical question by the Buddha on page 10, line 4, where he says, now why would that be true? Okay, so you got to jump back to page 9, where you have the second line from the bottom, where the Buddha himself is saying, now why would that be the case? And then the Buddha himself goes on to explain why that would be the case in a positive way and in a negative way. So Je Tsongkhapa reporting the second rhetorical question begins on page 10, line 4, to say, well, here's the second rhetorical question where the Buddha says, now why would I say that? And then the Buddha goes on to explain in a positive way and a negative way why he would say that, what? Nominal things don't have any nature of their own, okay? And are creations of our concepts, so in a positive way and a negative way. So he says, now the second rhetorical question, Je Tsongkhapa is going to clarify for us. Now what they mean when they say things are a creation of your concepts or labels or something like that, and what they mean when they say things don't exist by definition, we're going to get into that in a lot more detail in the next few days.
야게 군다 챙이 뭐니 뭐 셰세 도디 고니 지지와 나네 나네 당분이지 뭐들랜디 군다 챙이 뭐니 뭐 셰 대지시나 시비 주된 지바 거나 각조네 주된 지다 조네 주된 셰니 도디 니네 디 바이 틱디기 전다 디 때문에 니네 디 바이 틱디기 전다 디 때문에 니네 디 바이 틱 전다 디 때문에 정말로 동거로 chen 깨고 시비 송송아 디때 믹제바나 시리 믹좀 되니 믹제바나 시리 깨고 시비 정말로 동거로 시비 네 틱디네 디 바도 전다 디 때문에 깨고 시비 송송 디 오만이 계셔봤자 다 시원하라 샴되나 저 원님에 봐 찍시 저 원님에 봐 시. 다 원님에 봐 시. 니라데. 콜라야 콜라 시에서 도대 공대 찍지. 콜라야 당부 찍 당부들이 찍냐. 이거 소바디 디데나. 다 디데 찍고 찍지. 디리빠디 키. 샴데 로고라. 미 제바나 시. 오만님은 전에 다가란 시행 물. 지게도 정거나 동가 없이 미 제.
네. The next line, which is page 10, line 6 at the end, says, this opening of your eyes towards the true meaning of the sutra, and what that means is Je Tsongkhapa's clarification of what the sutra means in the two rhetorical questions in the sutra. I'm going to, in the latter two, in the two which are to come, you can also apply this explanation of that statement in the sutra to the latter two which are to come. What are the latter two which are to come? The other two attributes of the mind-only school. So they're going to apply these two rhetorical questions to the explanation of what it means to be dependent and what it means to be I think we're going to get Yongdrup, which means the emptiness of things, right? So Jetsun Kappa says, I opened your eyes right here to the meaning of these two rhetorical questions. Now you take that understanding and don't forget to take it with you when we go down to the other two attributes of the mind-only school, and it'll help you a lot when you get down there. Okay.
yagi tela kundala thingi ngoni me si rangi thingi tuba me sunga ma ta kundala thingi tuba me si ya kola kundala thingi tuba me si semta be si ya le kuma tanju e chö tham ji rangi thingi tuba me song ji kundala thingi me ko na chin tar ni de ko ni mo de chutta ka ga kundala thingi be si kan si la wa chi ina ya phra de sammo tong dang go semta kundala thingi tuba me si ya sammo de ne la tang tanju e kundala thingi 메즈 삼모 딘데질 땅기 아래 좀 자글라면 좀 보시면 디는 이와 뭐지 체미 미세 톡 조심.
Now the next section is very cool. Jetsun Kappa is going to go into the point where, you know, the mind-only school says that things don't exist by definition. And the Madhyamika, the higher schools also say, especially Prasangika, say that things don't exist by definition. What do they mean when they say that things don't exist by definition? The wording is the same. When a mind-only person will say things don't exist by definition, a middle-way person will say things don't exist by definition. But what they mean is totally different. You know, what those words mean to the mind-only people and what those words mean to the middle-way people is completely different. So Jetsun Kappa, in the section immediately to follow, is going to clarify the distinction between what the members of those two schools mean when they both say the same thing, that things don't exist by definition.
What did it?
Listen.
Kundala me ju tingi de shopping jubati.
Listen.
Kundala me ju tingi ngo ni rangi tingi chuba me ba chawo so da kundala tingi me se tai se abu chuma des. Tingi mo me se rangi tingi chuba me sta kala se ko ta rangi tingi ye me se rangi tingi ye me de karla che bo re se diri rangi tingi ye me ten ne se mingdan dala de ne shak pa dala rangi tingi ji me pa tang mingdan dala de shak pa ma yin ge ji chö ko rangi tingi ye ge
So you have this difficult expression in the sutra where he says things don't have their own characteristics. Things don't have a nature of having characteristics. And now we've explained it as meaning things don't have a nature of existing by definition or through their own characteristics. So what do they mean when they say that? In the mind-only school, they're saying that whether something exists through its own characteristics or by definition or not refers to the question of whether or not they are simply constructs of our concepts or not. Are they simply constructs of our mind, or are they not simply constructs of our mind? If they are simply constructs of our mind, they don't exist by definition. They don't exist through their own characteristics, through their own nature. And if they are not simply concepts of our mind, then they do have some existence through their own nature or by definition. So that's what a mind-only person means. That's how they draw the line between whether or not something exists by definition or whether or not something exists through its own characteristics. That's what they mean. Is it or is it not simply a construct of our mind? If it is simply a construct of our mind, then it doesn't exist by definition or through its own characteristics. If it is not a construct of our mind, then it does exist by definition or through its own characteristics. The expression in Tibetan for existing nominally, or this just exists as a concept or something like that, is actually two different elements. It says Mingdang De Shakpa means established by use of labels and terms. Okay, so you have to remember those two words. You know, in the mind-only school, when they say it's nominal, they're talking about that it's established through the use of labels and terms, and those each have their own special meaning. When you say it exists through labels, the word label refers to its actual name. So in the case of a water pitcher or something, it would be the word or the sound, the name, water pitcher, pitcher. Okay, but then when in your mind you think this is a pitcher, or you picture it as a pitcher, and you think of it as a pitcher, and you have a mental image of it as a picture. That process is called term here. So when you say nominal means exists through names and terms, name refers to its physical name, the name that people use for it, and then term refers to the conceptualization of it as a vase, or thinking of it as a vase, or mental picture of it as a vase. Okay. So remember that we're in the mind-only school, and they're talking about the meaning of when you say that things don't exist by definition means that they are simply constructs of your mind, labels and terms, right? But when you say that, don't forget that just because you've labeled and termed something doesn't mean that it necessarily exists. Okay, there are lots of things that you can imagine that don't exist. So there are things that you can imagine that do exist, and there are things that you can imagine that don't exist. And we have to draw a distinction between that. For example, we could take, he says, a rabbit's horns. And he says, well, maybe that's not such a good example because, you know, Geshe Lothar came over and showed me a postcard from America one day of a jackrabbit with these horns on it. And so I'm not sure if they exist in America or not. Maybe they do. Maybe that's not such a good example to take, you know. We better stick to something more clearly non-existent, like how about a flower that grows in midair without any dirt, no water, no nothing, you know, just grows like here. And he says, no, that's not really a very concrete example. Let's see, let's look around and find something. How about these glasses, you know? The fact that I'm holding in my hand glasses which are made of gold, okay? The glasses, the eyeglasses in my hand are made of gold, okay? So when I say that, I'm applying a label to that. I'm saying glasses made of gold. There's a name, right? There's a word. There's a name there. Now how about a term? The term comes shortly after that. You know, I say glasses made of gold, and in your mind pops up this thing of, you know, glasses that are shining with yellow metal and things like that, and then already you've got a term. So you've got a label and a term, and you've got a word and a thought and a concept about it, but that doesn't mean that the thing that there do exist eyeglasses made of gold in my room. Okay, so you can imagine something, you can label something, you can construct something mentally. That remember that doesn't necessarily mean that it exists. Okay. You might think to yourself, only a crazy man would start talking about golden glasses, but you know, I was just trying to give you an example. Okay? Of something that didn't exist. Right? So Geshe Thubten is trying to point out here exist.
인간 두바디 야꿈이지.
네네.
요루장 탄주에 여반은 민기 탄이지 오는 샤바다 체 미디베스 셈담베 군다 민게 샤방이 세야고다 탄주 샤방고 또니 미디 뭐 첨부요 알아요. 체 미디베. 템 하든 뭐 인자 민데 샤바 군 그디 뭐 인자 랑이 텐기 주마도 세야고 그디 뭐 차래. 랑이 텐기 유미지 돼요. 미디로.
No, so don't forget that when we talk about nominal stuff, that whether you're a middle way person or whether you're a mind-only person, you're still going to accept that it doesn't exist by definition. You're going to say this is only a construct of I shouldn't go that way. Still you're going to say that it doesn't exist by definition. But don't forget that they mean totally different things when they talk about something not existing by definition. When they say that things are constructs of names and terms, labels and terms, meaning words and thoughts, when they say that things are constructs, what the mind-only school means when they say things are constructs of words and thoughts, and what the middle way people say when they say things are constructs of words and thoughts, those two things are totally different. What they mean when they say that, when they give it that positive expression, things are just constructs of your minds and thoughts, they have a totally different meaning in mind when they use those words. Therefore, when they're talking about the lack of that, or when they're talking about that things don't exist by definition, they have, again, a totally different meaning. So there's a totally different and contradictory, clashing idea of what it means when we say things don't exist by definition, because there's a totally different idea of what we mean when we say things are constructs, or what it means to be a thing by virtue of a construct. Okay?
What? 타인들도 내가 진짜 숨어서 꿈이야. 지금 주가 되는 거. 지금 숨었잖아. 왜냐면 이랑 생기 여바 짐바 여나? 한주랑 생기 주랑 생기 여바 짐바양 가도 짐바양 여라 손에. 이 가르쳐서 니 시에바데 샘담에. 다 군다다고 지기를 지기 띵더라 봐. 군다다고 지기를 띵도 샘잠베 대비 샘담바 권한주 대비고 랑기 생기 주가 짐진긴도 진주지 여나? 근데 로텔라 탄주이 되바다지 군다랑이 생기 진주가 로텔라 창그래. 창그래.
Listen, this is getting a little tough, okay? Where both schools are talking about the same objects, remember? They're talking about what we call nominal stuff, okay? They're both referring to what the mind-only school describes as nominal stuff. And the point that Geshe Thubten wants to make next is that when you look upon nominal stuff as a mind-only school and try to think of it as existing by definition, then you are automatically thinking of it as existing by definition in the way that the Madhyamika schools explains existing by definition. So I'll say it again. When you're in the mind-only school and you're looking at this nominal stuff and you're saying, I wonder what it would be to look at it as if it existed by definition, you are automatically then also looking at it as existing by definition in the way that that expression is used by the middle way school. But, okay. If you get into a formal debate about this in the debate ground, you get into a big hassle. Okay. So I have a question to ask you, okay? Now, don't forget, we're sticking to the mind-only school, okay? And when you're in the mind-only school, and take anything that's a nominal, let's take nominal stuff itself, for example, okay? Nominal stuff, and you're focusing on nominal stuff, and you're thinking of it as existing by definition, okay? You're trying to think of it as if it were existing by definition. Is that a good state of mind or a bad state of mind? Is that a good perception or a bad perception to see nominal stuff as existing by definition? In the mind-only school. Kaisa, lo lokpares, dingmate. Rangiteni ki dube, kunda de rangiteni ki duba yin se semsame lu shisha chena. Kunda de so rangiteni ki duba yin se agi samlo de dukjare, yamamade. So we agreed. You think it's a bad, it's the wrong state of mind. I just want to check, are you all a single mind stream or do you have separate mind streams? Because if you have separate mind streams, I would expect everyone to, give a slightly different answer or everyone to give an answer. But if it's just one person giving an answer, I guess I have to assume that everybody here has a single mind stream. Let's hear an answer, guys.
The minority school and the middle way school said, if you're in both schools, that they agree that nominal stuff is the same. So how could it be good or bad? How could it be negative or positive in the minority school?
I don't get you.
Well, he said that the minority school...
Genge Sena that they call that's how I'm going to Gengi said, Kunda Rangi Seniki Dupade, Semtamba Yankagione, Umapayan Kagione, Chetande, Chipa Meadows, the look Nigalolia, the low opportunity inside us. The Kunda the Rangi Seniki Duba Yin Sagi, low the low inside.
illusion right thing to use come
you're right when you say that in both schools it's wrong to think of nominal stuff as existing by definition. And now you've jumped to my second question already. So you're really good because you covered two of my questions at once before I got to the second one. I asked you whether I had teeth or not, and you answered me, yeah, you have teeth and hair.
American lumbe nijidan, pepe lumbe nijini, pepe lumbe ni is sure the shira covers. Into the sure car, she said the church is that the need to what a patch of shiving, church is a company, but the need number 2 girls, my own young girls. Koya need to want some people should add one top should have made one of the classes of need shows and not young women. Church is not what Tabachim saying, I young setting there the Joe Line, the China American Lumeni and Pachi Prevent Lumeni the job, Tabachim, you get something in Joe Line.
He's making jokes and making fun of you, and he doesn't want you taking any offense. You know, like it's like you're giving him two answers, which is good. And it's like, you know, when I think about Tibetans, they like the Dharma so much that if they get a chance to go to 2 classes, you know, right one after the other, back to back, that they'll definitely agree. They'll say, oh yeah, I'll go to both, you know. And then you say, would you like to have a meal right after you've already had a meal? You know, would you like to come to both? They say, they get embarrassed, you know. They say, well, you know, I really shouldn't eat twice, right at one after the other. And you Americans look like you're the same. You know, you have great faith in the Dharma, and you look like you could take back-to-back classes, and you'd still come back for more. And so I'm glad to see that you're coming back for more on the question too. Looks like, based on that, I have to say you must have a lot of faith in the Dharma because you like back-to-backs. I could guess how you were going to answer even before I asked the question. You guys in general, that you know, you seem to be very interested, and when I ask a question, I like to get more answers. Is good.
Dogenda, Dugenda, Sangenda, Kala Sangenda, Kansas, Tabasho to wear. How Kansas see a call, Ben around from the Jason, go to Amjor, to Migre to Anno, to Lakbar, to Kambar, to Ten, in Kansas, Halamiki, Jetta, today, Tiny attack was you are tiny doctor and a basic. Get it. That did it on to the Teju, Manga, see the Katu, Halam Teju, minutes. Teju Suk Cheta, Jetta sign, Kandu, Tanya doctor and sure, conducting the Teju, Halam thinks the Mavach Shake. Takasi, today, Tanya doctor and need to make anything yours, Tarang thing to be tap teacher. Don't develop to the Tanya doctor and near Boko Tayu, anything to tell Chimba. Same time, bet sure can't kind of Tanya doctor and need to you again, Jaris. Jay on the Tanju, Rangi thing to their coke. Same time, we don't like you again, Charlie. And you don't mayor, you again, Charlie. Just no platinum.
Now here's the basis of the whole hassle between the middle way and the mind-only school on this question. What does it mean for a thing to exist by definition? What do we mean when we say that a thing exists by definition? If we go to the Prasangika, the consequence school, the higher school of the middle way, right? The higher school of the middle way says that when we examine something to determine whether or not it exists by definition, we try to take any object. Let's take a person, for example, okay? There's 2 kinds of ways of looking at a person. You can just leave it and not think about his parts or trying to find the real person there or something like that. Just leave it alone, Don't think about where is this person really. There's somebody standing there, somebody's walking, somebody's eating lunch, somebody's doing all these things. If you just leave it like that, there's a person there and you can't deny it. There's a person there. They're doing something, okay? But if you really look into it and you try to examine where is the person in their finger? Is the person their finger? Is the person their hand? Is the person their body? Is their person any one part or the parts altogether, something like that? If you really tear it apart and go looking for the person in any of the parts, for example, of the person, and you keep checking to find where is the thing that I give the name person? You know, where is the object that I give the name and the idea of person? If you go into the parts, if you analyze, if you rip it apart, you'll get kind of lost in it. You won't find any person. So, you know, you get this sort of feeling of loss or something. You're looking for a person and you really can't find any clear person when you go digging into the person. And that fact that when you go digging into and looking for the person in the parts of the person and wandering around checking for the person, the fact that you don't find any person is an indication that person doesn't exist by definition. If you could then find a person, you know, digging around in the parts, examining, not just satisfied to say, oh, he's getting up, he's walking, he's eating, he's doing this. But if you really go in and try to find the person in all the parts of the person, if you were then to find a person, that would be a person that existed by definition. And that's what the middle way school means when they say a person exists by doesn't exist by definition. Because if you found something then, that would be a person that did exist by definition. Now the mind-only school has a totally different idea. They say if you wander around looking for the person, you better find something that's the person. You better find something that we call the person. When you go digging into the person, is the person in their hand, is the person in their parts, where is the person, you better find something. Because if you don't, then there's no person. And when you find something, that person, that's what it means to, that's not what they mean when they say you better find that it exists by definition, okay, when you're looking for a person, okay. But remember before we're talking about nominal things, now we're talking about people, which are not nominal things. But when you go looking for a person as a person, you better find something. And when you find it, that's existing by definition. So they have a totally different idea. So the middle way school says, when you don't find anything, then you've established that it doesn't exist by definition. The mind-only school says, you better find something when you go looking, and that does exist by definition. Okay, it's a totally different idea of what it means. Okay?
They're coming at the same ending, there's the same result, right?
In name only, the same expression, but not. Mind only believes that when you look for a person in their parts, you better find something, and you will find something, and in that sense they do exist. The Madhyamika says when you go looking for the person in the parts, you won't find anything, and that's what it means to not exist by definition.
Okay. Sai de di sim na ta ta nya. Kan kan han yu ran tin tu je ko ta ti ke de chi ge. Ni che han da sin de ta ni mi lu si ta. Ke me ba ni ran tin tu ba si ta ni mi lu. Ke han yu ran tin tu je ko tan da de ni ta ni ta. Ta kan da kan ni ge ni. Han yu ji sa song ye.
You better right now stop and get that clear in your mind very carefully, because you can't forget it and you're going to need it later. The mind-only school, when they say something doesn't exist by definition, what they mean is when you go looking for the thing which is given the name person, and you go looking for that thing which is given the name person among all the parts of the person, you're not going to find the person. And that's what it means not to exist by definition. So you have to get that clear in your mind. When they say something doesn't exist by definition, what they mean is when you go looking for the thing which we call person among the parts of the person and elsewhere, and you don't find anything, that means it doesn't exist by definition. If you did find something which is impossible, that would exist by definition. Don't forget, that's what you got to fix that in your mind at this point in the class, that's what the middle way school thinks when they say something does or doesn't exist by definition. Now we go to the mind-only school's meaning or idea of what you mean when you say something exists by definition or something doesn't exist by definition, which is totally different. Now, when something exists by definition, right, in the mind-only school, which they say things do, some things do, it means that it is not just a product of our conceptions. It is not just a product of our conceptualizations, but rather from the object's own side, it has some real existence. It has some definitive existence from its own side without my thinking about it in a certain way. And to them, that means the thing exists by definition, and that means in their thinking, this makes something almost real. This means that it has some reality. It's got some reality from its own side. It's not totally dependent on my thinking of it a certain way. And that's what it means to exist by definition. They don't say that nothing exists by definition. They say that many things do exist by definition. And existing by definition means it's not just a product of my concepts. It's not just a product of my mind. It has some true existence from its own side. So what does it mean when we say this object has its own unique way of existing? It is existing from its own side in its own unique way, and that's a description of any particular object. Oh, what? It's not just I made it up with my mind. It has some unique, some particular existence of its being that particular object, right? It has its own unique way of being, that it's coming from its own side. What do they mean when they say it has some unique way of being from its own side? It has from its own side some way of being. It's not just a product of my concept. What does the mind-only school mean when they say it has some unique way of being from its own side? It has some true reality from its own side. First of all, what they mean is it has its own causes. It has been produced from its own causes. That's one way of describing what the mind-only school means when they say objects have some true existence from their own side, of their own. Okay? What the first thing they mean is that, for example, if it has come from its own causes, clearly produced by other causes, then that thing has some unique way of being of its own. And then there's a second way of describing what it means when the mind-only school says that this object has some unique existence from its own side, and that is it has some isness. It has some own characteristicness. It has some own true reality of its own. It has some kind of true nature of its own. It has some kind of unique identity of its own. And so that's the second meaning they have when they say it exists from its own side, or it has some unique being from its own way. So remember, there's two different kinds of unique way of being from its own side. First one meaning, in the mind-only school, right, that it is coming or it has been produced by its particular causes. That is a unique way of being. Second unique way of being is that it has some side of its own identity, or of its own real nature, of its own reality, its own unique quality of its own. And those are the two ways in which the mind-only school think that something must have its own unique way of being from its own side. I got a question for you guys. We're in the mind-only school. Mind-only school takes all existing phenomena and groups it into certain groups. How many groups there? right? It's a pity that only one person can answer. It makes me think again that you all have only one mind stream. In Tibetan class, everyone answers like as one. You know, they all go 3. You know. You don't have to yell because you probably get a sore throat. But anyway, try to all answer at once. If not all at once, then slowly each person answer. Pretty close to each other. I guess everyone agrees that it's 3. Now, careful question, and I want a good answer from you all, okay? You go into those 3 groups. Take your mind into those, go through those 3 groups mentally. try to pick out the groups that would involve things which come from their own causes. Tell me how many groups involve things that are coming from their own causes. Remember we talked about its unique nature, meaning coming from its own causes. How many groups are there that involve stuff that comes from its own causes? And what is the name of that group? You can answer in English and you don't have to answer in Tibetan. So you got one, any more? Oh. Okay, so you've covered my first half of my description of something having a unique nature of coming from its own side, right? Which was, did it come from its causes? So I admit you covered that pretty well. Now take your mind back to those three groups and tell me if there's any objects which seem to have an identity, unique identity of their own, or a unique identity coming from their own side. Are there any things in those three groups that involve things which have a unique, special identity coming from their own side? How many? First decide whether or not there are any in those groups, and then how many of the things, how many groups involve things that have a unique nature that's coming from their own side. Come on. They do the chigmato mass. Koran says sumga lolea dinde yore. Rangi tumamayim be nelu yinke. Deni chini sorti yinke. Now I want to change my description of what it means to have its own nature, or its own identity, or its own way of being. Let's say what happens if I restrict it to some kind of ultimate way of being, some kind of tip-top way of being, some kind of highest way of being? How many of the things in those three categories have some kind of ultimate way of being, some kind of ultimate identity? That tatos is sumbina, ni yores. Oh, ching, sorry. One. Ching yores. How come I think so I think there must have been somebody that came with you who believes the same thing, that if you asked them, do you want to come to dinner, they'd say, no, I don't feel like it right now. But you say, you want to come to Dharma class, that they would run to the Dharma class. So so you seem to be, maybe we got another Tibetan here, not just an American. That's what he's saying. Okay. The kind of person that would run to a Dharma class and say, I don't have time for dinner. Okay. Okay. You sound like my paisano. Okay. From the same place. Okay. So anyway, chigiyore sumudo. Chigiyore. Which one? You showed me the tip of the iceberg. I can guess the rest there. You don't have to go into big explanation. I know which one you're talking about. Among the three, now take your mind through those three categories again. Go through them and tell me which of them exists by definition. In which of those three categories are stuff or things that exist by definition? Ni yores. Kotanga gegere chik ni is two of them. Yeah. So here we got to the main belief of the mind-only school altogether, okay, which is that two of the two of the categories or two of the groups can be said to exist by definition, and one of them doesn't exist by definition. Obviously, the one that doesn't exist by definition according to our school is the nominal stuff, because that's just a construct of your mind. But the emptiness category, and then the other category, which is things which depend on other things, which means caused things, right? Things that come from causes. Those two, according to their school, do have some definitive nature of their own. They have some definitive nature of their own. And then one of the categories, the nominal stuff category, is really a construct and doesn't have any definitive nature of its own. And that's the guts of the mind-only school. So don't forget now, stick it in your mind, okay? Remember. Oh, he says, no, you better correct it to here. Stick it in your mind, okay? Remember what it is when you're in the mind-only school and you say things do have a definitive nature. They do exist by definition. Remember what it means. It means they are not simply constructs of my mind. They have some unique way of existing that comes from their own side. And never forget, okay, keep that in your mind. You have to remember that for this whole class, that when you're in the mind-only school, and when you're a mind-only school person, and when a mind-only school person says this thing has some kind of definitive existence or existence by definition, what they mean is that it's not just a construct of my mind, it has some ultimate or some unique way of existing that's coming from its own side. So when I say that the mind-only school says that when they think of something existing from its own unique way of being, you know, that something exists from its own side with its own unique way of being, how many unique ways of being pop up in your mind? You know, how many unique ways of being from its own side can you think of? Huh? Just all of them as a group. When a mind-only school person says this thing has some unique way of being from its own side, how many different unique ways of being are they thinking of when they say that? He went through that. Yeah. Rangi tumo mo yami duluki ngone dubase di la nagani yores. Chiti rangi kosa yudo. Rangi gule kewa lane. Rangi gule kewa. You answered so well that we're going to stick some extra robes on you and send you over to the debate ground and see if we can pass you as a monk. Ani doesn't So you agreed there's two? Yeah, unique way of being has two kinds of flavors of unique way of being, right? Yeah. One is coming from its own cause, and what was the other one he said?
The other one is an identity.
Yeah. Rangi tumo mayembe karsa ne look searching, tinyi searching, chinyi searching, yemba chiche, rangi gule kyodi chiche, da ni yones. Rangi tumo may do looking on a dubase de ni yones. How many you guys think there are? But you quiet ones in the back there. Ni yones. We can answer. Are your two the same as her two? Yes. You must, at this point in this class, make sure that you understand now that the distinction between those two schools, when they from their mouth say the same words, right, existing by definition, having some definitive existence, you better know at this point that they mean totally different things. One school meaning, you know, something impossible, right? The middle way school saying that's an impossible thing. Nothing can exist by definition, because when you go looking for the thing that's given the name person, you never will find a thing that's given the name person among its parts. And if you did find something which is impossible, that would exist by definition. And in the mind-only school, those things must exist by definition, because whether or not you think of them in a certain way, whether or not you project something in a certain way, they have some unique way of being from their own side. You better get that distinction straight now, or you're going to blow up your mind later. And don't mix up things. You know, when I talked about things having their own unique identity from their own side, don't forget that this is a unique belief of the mind-only school. Don't go mixing it up with other schools. It's only the mind-only school that's talking about, oh, this thing having some unique existence or identity of its own coming from its own side. Don't forget that that description of what it means to exist by definition or definitive existence is unique to the mind-only school. Don't go mixing it up with other schools later. This description of what it means when the mind-only school says that something has a unique existence from its own side, right? Those two flavors of that description is not something you're going to find written down in books, or you're not going to find descriptions of that in scripture. This is an oral tradition that's been passed down from person to person, and that's how you're getting it, okay? So don't go looking for it in a book. This is a very beautiful, unique oral instruction that's been passed down from ear to ear, he said. So don't forget that conversely, when the middle way school talks about something existing by definition, and don't remember what they mean when they say existing by definition, which is impossible according to them, right? Obviously, the mind-only school people will say, your description of what it means to exist definitively or by definition can't be correct, because it would apply to nothing. But our description of what it means, if we take your description of what it means to exist by definition, we think that applies to all things. We believe that when you go looking for the thing which is given a certain name, you must find it. We believe that your description of what it means not to exist by definition actually is not something which doesn't exist, it's something which does exist, and not only that, that every object must have that. Okay, so we don't agree to, the mind-only school says to the middle way school, your description of what it is to exist by definition, which you say is impossible with regard to anything, we say is not only possible, but requisite for every object that exists. It's surely when you go to look for the thing that was given the name, you better find something. So we don't accept. Conversely, the mind-only school says to the middle way school, your description of what it means to exist by definition is not only something that doesn't exist, it's something that must exist with regard to all existing things. So when the middle way school says that the description of something existing by definition is something that if you looked for the thing which got the name, right, ultimately you wouldn't find it. The mind-only school flips it around completely. They say every existing object in the universe, once it exists, it must exist in such a way that when you look for the thing that's given the name, you must find it. So this is the big difference between the two schools. The mind-only school is saying that every existing thing exists in such a way that when you go looking for the thing that got the name of the thing, you better find it. And the Madhyamika school is saying when you go to look for the thing that's given the name independent of the name, right, you'll never find it. There's a big distinction between these two schools.
Okay. Semdam lu so shisha chene koran she tanju kete do romo tanju is tutakol romo semdam koran tutako shisha che on de ta gundate tanju shaye ran tingi tukyan ko reso matuken ko reso semdam koran chana ran tingi matu siya ina tanju shaye ran tingi tukyan ko gundate ting do dugo mindugo ya choice.
Oh, tough one here, okay? Okay. Think about what the Madhyamika, and especially when he speaks about Madhyamika, he's talking about Prasangika, the consequent school. So when the consequent school describes something as existing by definition, right, let's talk about it in the sense of the mind-only school's description of nominal stuff, right? Out of the three groups, we're talking about nominal stuff. How does nominal stuff relate to the Madhyamika people's description of what it means to exist by definition? Question for you guys, expect an answer. Okay? You're focusing on nominal stuff as described by the mind-only school. How does that relate to how the Madhyamika Prasangika school describes things that exist by definition?
It would be like all existing phenomena to the Madhyamika Prasangika school would be the nominal stuff to the mind-only school.
Sometimes look at Shishak Chene ki Kunda Serdi Dang Uma Tengyoa Serdi ki Chutam Je Topi Taksam Yimbasde Pecha double do Tengdus Rankiteni ki Dupa Serdi dan Chipares Sochires Tengyoa ge Rankiteni ki Dupse Dang Semtame Kunta Yimbe Dupse to Pecha double do Sigdo.
Kunta Ding to do me do that never shall have Kunta Ding to send them to Koran research, Kunta Ding to Tanju Shayan Koran thing to Kunta Ding to do, they just send Kunta Ding to you study somebody.
Let's make it a simple yes and no question, okay? Think of nominal stuff as described by the mind-only school and tell me whether what the Prasangika describes as existing by definition would apply to it or not. Okay, think of what the Madhyamika Prasangika means when they say existing by definition and tell me whether the category in the mind-only school called nominal stuff has that or not. Rangi Kisaniki Tengyewe Lugi Rangi Kisaniki Dupse De Kuntag Yinayang Yongdub Yinayang Kari Shewa Yinayang Dila Dukumares, Kari Sena Mevares. When you say that Prasangika's idea of what it is to exist by definition could never apply to any of the three groups except by the mind only because it doesn't even exist, are you putting a Madhyamika hat on or are you putting a mind only hat on? Whose viewpoint are you saying from? Was I asking you the question from the point of view of a mind-only person, or was I asking you the question from the point of view of a middle-way person? Maybe it's that I didn't translate it very clearly, so you didn't know which school you were supposed to be in. Anyway, now I'll say it again more clearly. Okay. From the point of view of a person sitting from the point of view of a member of the mind-only school, does the description of what it means to exist by definition according to the Prasangika school apply to the group that the mind-only school says exists nominally? Nominal stuff. Did I hear this? Did I hear this? My question was that. That was my question.
군다에 띵도 탄주랑 띵이 주하고 누가 왔어. 타고 이어나 군다에 띵도 여빠지 샘담을 탄주 때 먹어. 탄주 때 나서. 야, 내가 샘담을 하나 시작 지는데 군다에 띵도 탄주에 깨제시에랑 띵이 주하고 진소나 진게 일로고 양아지 저기도 누구시.
나서. Oh, wow. Now we're back to the original point. This is kind of cool. So, assuming you're a member of the mind-only school, and when you say that the description of the Madhyamika school of what it is to exist by definition does apply to our group that we call nominal stuff, and assuming you're in the mind-only school, don't forget, when you think of nominal stuff as existing by definition in the way described by the Madhyamika school, is that a correct state of mind or an incorrect state of mind? Don't forget, to a mind-only school person.
It's incorrect.
Whoa, sure? If you think of a nominal object as existing in a definitive way, as definitive way as described by the Madhyamika, are you, according to mind-only school, thinking of that nominal thing in a wrong way or a right way? D'accord, sometimes shisha chebina, the lokshe mares, tatares, the yagares. So please keep that in your mind, okay? We got to that place. Don't forget it. According to Mind Only School, if you think of labeled things in the way that the Madhyamika describes as existing by definition, you're right on, right? You're thinking of it in just the right way, okay? According to Madhyamika, you're crazy, right? But according to Mind Only School, you're thinking of it just the right way. Oh yeah, if I look for the thing that was labeled Winston, I would find the thing that was labeled Winston. If I think things that are labeled, right? If I think of them that way, oh, you're right on, okay? According to Mind Only School, you're right on. That kind of thought is perfect, okay? Okay, that brings us back to the text where we started from like a long time ago, page 10. So we got back to the original text, right? We were talking about when a mind-only person regards an object which is nominal, right? Nominal stuff, and they think of it in a way which is exists by definition, as existing by definition is described by the Madhyamika school. Then are they correct? Yes, they are. Okay. We're on page 10, third line from the bottom. So you've got to understand the wording here in the Tibetan. Wenkyang means but. If you have the state of mind in which you believe that something is existing by definition, then with regard to things that are nominal, then you must also be regarding that nominal thing in a way in which the Madhyamika school describes as something existing by definition. You must be seeing it that way, right? If you see nominal things as existing by definition, then automatically you must be seeing them in a way that sees them as existing by definition as described by the Madhyamika. Okay? It's a problem with the Tibetan. You have to be able to understand the Tibetan pretty clearly to get what he's trying to say here. But with regard to nominally existing things, that group in the mind-only school called nominally existing things, when you see it as when a mind-only school person sees it as existing by definition, they automatically perceive it as existing by definition in the way that's described by the Madhyamika school. Is that a problem for you guys or not? Is that hard to catch, or does it feel comfortable? Any questions about it? Yeah. Kandishyachiyus.
That seeing the imputed, the nominal stuff as Rangi Tsiniki Drupa is what the mind only is refuting, right? It's merely posited by the label and the thought.
Semtambe lula kunta shisha chene ti Rangi Tsiniki Drupa yin me seriganga konzo lugi Rangi Tsiniki Drupa di mesigro. Yeah. In their school, they have to say that. You're right. Things don't have the definitive existence. Nominal things don't have definitive existence as that is defined by their own school, right? That's true. So do you think that if you were a Semtamba, if you were a mind-only school person, and you thought that things did have definitive existence, as that definitive existence is explained by their own school, would that be a correct state of mind or a wrong state of mind?
Not correct.
Rang lugi shisha chene, rang lugi rangi tseniki dupa seadi, rangi lugi kundaka dengne dupa yin sewa yina, di loksheres. Yeah, exactly right. That's so far exactly right. Okay.
다 거래서 한 진짜 몇코나 루시샤 신 진짜 로티기 탄주에 랑기 생이 주가 딩기하고 끝나 딩도 딩기 아래에서 비지남 되지.
Now the big question is, in the mind-only school, those things that are described as nominal by the mind-only school, and when they say that those don't have definitive existence as we describe definitive existence, okay, that state of mind is correct.
You mean we, middle way?
Yeah, no, you are mind-only school. Mind-only school people say that the things that the mind-only school thinks are what we call nominal, that they do not have a definitive existence as described by the mind-only school. That's a correct state of mind. Now, does that state of mind think of those same objects as having definitive existence as the Madhyamika people explain it, or doesn't it?
So mind-only people think that Madhyamika people think that nominal things have a self-existence? Is that?
No, that's not the question. When a mind-only school person thinks of nominal stuff as not having definitive existence, in the way that mind-only school people describe definitive existence, that state of mind, which is correct according to them, does that same state of mind regard those same objects and think that it does or it does not have definitive existence as described by the Madhyamika people? Yore. Umatang Yurwe Lusu Shisha Chineke Rangi Teneke Druba De Lo Dela Dindegi Loge Kundala Yosigres, the Kundalaya Semtamba Shisha Chebe Rangi Teneke Druba Mekyang. Mekyang, Umatangyo Luki Shisha Cheni Rangi Teniki Druba Del Lo Digi Di Kundaten Your cigarettes. The Semtame Lu Shisha Cheni Kundasiadi, Kundaki Tendu, Semtame Luki Rangi Teniki Druba Di Mekyang, Umatangyo Luki Shisha Chebe Rangi Teniki Druba Yours, and Lo Dil Shagares.
That's in the dish was. Semzame de ba ta ji ni kunda ra tin chuba ding lo du jia shi wa lo du jia ding kunda yi ding du tan ju ge jia di yo re sin lo ti gi sam ni na lo ti sam ni na le ba lo fra lo du jia jo ku di kunda ding du te ge jia di ding gi du ding na
da kozo dukcha se di shisha che yo manege kozo kunda ding du semta mi rang lu ke tseni rangi tseni ki duba me to be lo de res di shisha che ne
ke semta mi shisha chen ke ra re
la sa la ne
ge ge jia ti ga chua ti ga tang ge ma ne
la sa
kunda yi ding du rang tseni chuba ding lo du jia shi wa
na ne
lo du jia ku ta ga lo kha rang kunda yi ding du tan ju ge jia di ku ge ye xin
Okay, now I'm talking about a different state of mind, okay? You are in the mind-only school, okay? You are thinking about things that we describe as nominal in the mind-only school. But you're having a problem. You're believing that things do exist by definition as described by the mind-only school. Now that is a state of mind which is wrong, right? Okay. So does that wrong state of mind think of those same objects as existing by definition in the way that the Prasangika describe existing by definition?
No, I don't think so. in the mind-only school, they say that the things have parts and names, and that's why it's defined. But in the other school, they're talking about mental objects and not physical things.
The picture uma kaisa semtamilu shisha chebiche. Konzo kundaki tendu rangi tseni konzo shisha ki chene rangi tseni ki duba mekyang. That tengyuri luki rangi tseni ki duba seadi yosares kayen sena kundan rangi kuntas labdiganga mingdan de shapa yemis picture the uma tengyuri luki shisha chene rangi tseni ki duba de lokshe dilea lokshe yinayang dil kunda tendu uma tengyuri luki shisha chene rangi tseni ki duba yes cigarettes, no delay, yes cigarettes. You're pretty much on the right track. It's good. You're going the right way. You're on the right track. But
군다리 탄이 답을 딱 된다 했잖아. 얘 봐인 슬랍노네 군다리 왜 봐인 슬랍. 탄주 샘템블로라 군다리 탄이 답을 딱 된다 했잖아. 얘 봐인 삼개지 놓고 양콩을 딴 거를 두어한다.
Okay, so now you're back in the mind-only school, and they're looking at those objects, And they say, when you look for the thing that got the name of the thing, without the name of the thing, right? You have to say that, I think. Which according to Madhyamika is impossible, right? But in their school, if you're looking for the thing that got the name of the thing, independent of the name of the thing, do you find it or not? They say, yes, you do find it. You do find it. Now, is that a wrong state of mind or a right state of mind? Correct state of mind or incorrect state of mind? Sulu shishachine. Tani tabi datin seri tina yose drup ser di lodila di lokshe yuna mena ale sulu shishachine. Hey, come on, we're talking mind only school. We're in the mind only school. So according to kuntak. Yeah. Is that a correct state of mind according to them or a wrong state of mind according to them? That when you look for the thing that got the name, independent of the name, you do find the thing.
Yeah, but you can erase it too, you know? You can find it, but for how long? But you can erase it.
Karishu, Minga Kaisa, Tanita Bitatin Sawitsena, Dukuris, Niegeres.
So where is it?
Nani? Shepherd Lokshe Manes, Yagares. So this is going to stand for all nominal stuff. Okay, my rosary is going to stand for all nominal stuff in the universe. So forget Madhyamika, okay? In the mind-only school, when you're focusing on this rosary, and this rosary is standing for everything in the world, which is what we call nama, which is, don't forget, refers to all unchanging things, right? Except for emptiness. Don't forget, okay? So when you're focusing on that, and there's a state of mind that says, when I look for the thing which is labeled that, independent of the label, I do find it. In the mind-only school, is that a good state of mind or a bad state? Right state of mind or a wrong state of mind?
I don't know.
So I'll give you an illustration that will help you. Is this is a rosary, right? So no matter what state of whose mind it is, right? Whose perception it is. If a state of mind looks at this rosary and says, this is a rosary, do we put that in the category of correct perceptions or incorrect perceptions?
No matter who's looking at it, you say?
Yeah.
It depends on who's looking at it.
That calls it Uma Mambo Tiyor again. That calls it Uma. Forget Madhyamika. Don't forget. I'm just saying, you just got through a big dose of diamond cutter over and over again, right? That's Madhyamika. Forget Madhyamika. From the mind-only school, would any reasonable state of mind look at this and say it's a rosary?
Yes.
Yeah, and would that be in the category of correct states of mind or incorrect states of mind? That is lokshe mayim but the betata res. And then suppose, according to the mind-only school, that another person comes with another state of mind and looks at the same thing and says, "That's no rosary." Would that be in a good state of mind or a wrong state of mind? Then we call that a bad state of mind. So will that stupid state of mind, that wrong state of mind, look at the rosary and also say, yes, this is a rosary? No, it won't think that. Because it's thinking it's not a rosary, right? Yeah. If the mind that had previously came and said this is not a rosary suddenly came and said this is a rosary, he wouldn't be in the bad state of mind category anymore. He would have shifted over to the good state of mind category.
타고 잡으시는 군다체 그러와 선담 리소시 엄마 위샤 선담 리소시샤 제는 군다한테 랑기 테니기 주가 생긴 게 그러지 여봐 홀로 누가 임바 야가 임바서 저랑 누가 지송아
So forget Madhyamika, remember we're in the mind-only school, and you're looking at this rosary which is standing for all unchanging things except for emptiness, right? Remember? Nominal things. And it comes up and says, this thing exists by definition. And by definition in their own meaning of the word, right? Which state of mind is that? Is that good or bad? Wrong.
Wait, is that it
Exists by definition as they define exists by definition.
It's bad because you can't
It's
do it
bad.
naturally.
Yeah. They did that Dukcharis.
다 독자한테 군다하고 타니에다 딱 전세나니에 빠레스 생기만
Now that same state of mind that takes this in the wrong way, right? It says this exists by definition as they describe existing by definition. Okay? Would that state of mind understand that when you look for the thing that is named this object, you find it? Would it say that or not? Yeah. Would that
Yes, it will say that.
mind only school? Yeah. Would that wrong state of mind that says this does exist by definition, which is wrong, right? Yeah, about the kundak. If that wrong state of mind came and looked at kundak and said, yes, this does exist by definition, which is wrong even in their own school, right?
Yeah.
Would that same state of mind come to the rosary or come to the kundak and say, oh, when I look for the thing named kundak, I do find something named kundak?
Say it.
Tani tapi tatin sewa tsena yus sigres
쌤기 사무 시에
sem rangi tseni ki drupa yin serken digi lo digi rangi tatin sewa tsena drup sigres
다 세놓고 독스파 치치 시에하고 독치치 야가 관을 때에는 조사 말했어
So if you say that the state of mind which wrongly held that it existed by definition as existing by definition is described in their own school, if you say that that same state of mind perceived that this, when you look for the thing named kundak, you do find something called kundak, wouldn't it shift over to the good states of mind? Because it was right about that. Oh boy. You've got a wrong state of mind in the mind-only school. It's looking at kundak. It's thinking that nominal stuff, and it's thinking that this stuff does exist by definition as we describe what existing by definition means, which even according to them is a wrong state of mind. But if that same state of mind were to say to itself, if I look for the thing named nominal stuff, I do find something, ultimately. Then wouldn't it, according to their school, shift over to the correct state of mind? Yeah. Didn't yaga the dogeres, yaga the ma pogeres. So now is he bad state of mind or good state of mind? Everything. Da yaga chona chimbre. Chetan yaga dire. But wouldn't you have to say it's sort of a mix? Yeah. Chega res. Oh, that's really too bad. You're going to amputate this mind into two parts and say, oh, this part's good, this part's sounds like you're saying we got to split him in two now.
He's bringing us to the point that that's why we could say it's the same as the Madhyamika because it's no longer a mental image. Is that what he's trying to prove?
Oh, I know what you mean by that. I don't know. That did Josan come and do it. That picture, did Umagi Tawala do it with? Gang. So, question for you guys. In the school of the mind-only school, do they say that when you look at kundak things, right? When you look at nominally existing things, which for them, don't forget, is things that are like concepts or constructions. When you look at them, do they in their own school say that when you look for the thing which is given the name of that, do you find it, or do they say that you don't find it? Huh?
They say that you do find it.
Kola manyes. Tani tapi datin sa chena manyes. When you say they don't find it, what are you thinking of? Are you sticking Madhyamika in here or what?
Rangi So how can you find it?
Yeah, no.
Oh, as I'm thinking about Yamaka's definition.
Oh, nga umala shoso. Yeah, didn't you? I have closed and locked the door in Majimika. I told you not to go there. In the mind-only school's own beliefs, when you look at something which exists by concepts, is it true that when you look for the thing that was given that name, do you find something?
Yeah.
Yes. 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 So in the mind-only school, does that state of mind belong in the good minds or the bad states of mind? So that previous state of mind, which said that it did exist by definition, as they describe existing by definition in their own school, which is a wrong state of mind, according to you, if it started thinking like that it did find something, then we'd have to move on over to the good states of mind. Right? Right. Nema rangi tsani ki dupa yin se ki lodi dukchandi oh yaga dila putsare ska yin se ko tani ta bita tso tsene nye se ki chale
ta kenda to bcha no se dukja ko yaga dila tang se na ngaro mir ji na da bo ko lop chong da me pangla yin ko lop to jap ji khanda yin chi ma ko yaga ta ko dukja ko yaga tan ru ma
you're describing, if we say it in the terms of people, right? That there's some kind of bad person, like somebody who never studies, not interested in Dharma, never doing anything, and then suddenly you decide to promote him to the good side. Just with regard with people, that'd be a little weird, Like they don't change that quickly. Okay, to make up your mind, is it on the good side or the bad side?
I think half and half. Does he still think the other way? Does he still think?
Like that. Did they join Jonas? The Yama determined my second, didn't they shop with you? Oh, not Norsha, did determine a second, didn't they? People can change like that, but can a state of mind change like that? Did I do it? Yamani. Ko me say que samlo did that. Ko you say que samlo did a big gawres.
Tie kunda de tangi kunda rangi tengi chuwa zingi lo ko pe ti pora lo dukja ji la ba. Ku ani
So you got two different states of mind here. You got one saying that these objects exist by definition according to the way we describe existing by definition, which is a lousy state of mind. And can that lousy state of mind suddenly say to itself, oh, when you look for the thing that's given the name nominal stuff, you do find it.
One state of mind can think both.
Tawa yin second, tawa min second, did bet gawres. Yinaya, Rangitani Duba yin, the same time we lose Shisha Chebe, Rangitani Duba yin, said, and Tani Tabitan and Sarah, and a year second in the Negawamanes, the Tumbores.
Kunda correcting to think that you are Kunda Rangi much about some thinking, some to junk, Kunda Rangi to Kunda Rangi to Tanya Tabutan, some green.
It's true with regard to nominal things that they don't exist by definition, and when you do go looking for the thing that got the name, independent of the name, you do find it. Okay, those two things, according to the mind-only school, both apply to nominally existing things. But can the state of mind that says this does not exist by definition, this does exist by definition, all simultaneously say this, when you look for the thing that's given its name, you do find it. Can that happen? No. Kundala kitani kidu ba yin se ki lo did da kundala tani tabitat and sorry tena years nye se ki lo did kapchi le yong mares. Lo china le yong mares. From the beginning, this has been my only question. That's Sam Shaper said it catching Marabes. They go Gurchong Marabes. Sam said it, Shaper said it catching my catching Kenchi Chevitures. And Captilla did they stop some of them. Did they jelly a young Gurdogman West? When you say that one state of mind has changed to another, when you say that the mind changes, you're not saying that one state of mind is the other state of mind. See, I mean, that's his real question. He's not saying, can the mind over time change? He's saying, can the way in which one state of mind views things actually be the way the other state of mind views it? Are those two ways of viewing something contradictory or not? Did that bad look at it? Did go at it? Like saying you could do by yin second and tiny type of that saying that yes said but the law said did they go at it?
If something.
Okay, let him go ahead. Let him go. Okay, if you want to raise an objection, go ahead. But generally, don't do that. Okay. No, go ahead.
Yeah, 제가 다 된다는 것도 깨져 욕다리 그네 정말. 이제 니는 쉬고 주바티. 인당 되게 세게 인당 숨바 꿈내지 숨는 거.
This whole hassle started from page 10, third line from the bottom.
왜냐 니 랑생기 옆에 짐바 연나. 근다. 탄주의 랑생기 주바 짐바 연.
But the book says right there that if that state of mind is holding that nominal things exist by definition, then it's also holding that they exist by definition in the way that in the way that the mind-only school says it. Middle way school says it is. Is that right? That's what the text says. Okay. You got that clear? I'll say it again. The state of mind which is holding that it exists by definition as the mind-only school describes it is also a state of mind which is holding that it exists by definition as in the way that the Prasangika holds it. Is that possible or not?
Yes.
He just got you saying it wasn't possible. With one state of mind have those two aspects at the same time.
But they're both wrong.
In the mind-only school?
To hold the imputed natures of Rangis and Gidrupa is
in the mind-only school.
Is wrong in the mind-only school. And you're saying it's right in the Gidrupa.
No. From the point of view of the mind-only school, can one state of mind have those two aspects at the same time?
As long as they're concordant aspects.
Rangitsani Gidrupa yin zin. Semsambe lu shishabe Rangitsani Gidrupa yin se ki lo dida. Umatangyoe lu shishabe Rangitsani Gidrupa yin se di lo nidi. Younger mares, younger mares.
왜냐 니 랑생기 옆에 짐바 연나 탄주 랑생기 주바서 탄이 다르 다 깨져 랑생기 주바 호나. 로 찌기 탄주 그 군다기 띵도 샘담에 되버데 랑이 띵 주바고 진소나. 근데 로 테라랑기 탄주 되버데 랑생기 주바 짐바 요아레 징기레 스피지나.
But the book says that with nominally existing things, that one state of mind can and does simultaneously believe that it exists by definition in the way that the mind-only school describes existing by definition, and at the same time believes that it exists by definition in the way that the Prasangika holds existing by definition.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So they must,
names and concepts.
must be both loksha.
Dida niga zingere, niga loksheres. Niga zingeres.
탄이라고 딱 생각이 있잖아. 이게 봐 진소나 대두아 타체도 로직 아니 괜히 주바 진소나 탄이에 딱 비데 탄주에 저보다 지랑 주바 진다고 가르랬잖아. 나게 되는 거서 찍고 딱 많이 맞지. 그 채고를 찍었는데 탄이에 딱 되는 자리잖아.
Don't lose yourself in the words existing by definition or having a definitive existence. Now let's go to the real meaning of it for the Majjhimika. For the middle way people. They think that when you say this thing exists by definition, what you're saying is when you look for the thing that got the name independent of the projection, independent of the name, you do find an existing thing. Can that same state of mind hold it to be existing by definition in the way that the mind-only school describes existing by definition?
You just got done saying it couldn't.
If it
Can't you think about it? That is sungsar was. 나 영식이 말해.
다 대체도 비지 나는 디세요. 디엔디다 디나는 대지 욕다시려. 그래서 디나는 시샤지 로고디 욕다시려.
But if you accept what the book says itself at this point and you try to think about it that way, it's a big hassle, right? There's a big problem here. Okay. 욕다 안 해. Now we got a philosophical mess and we got to clean up this philosophical mess.
욕다 상당 걸 가르치잖아. 다 소소스 삼무다네 직 삼무다네 직 해고지. 뭐 찍고 닭이 있거든. 자, 그 타니에 딱 된다 있잖아. 근데 꼬마 타니고 고자 양자 고자니 야. 언제 줘 말이 됐다 먹어 진짜 이제. 로 독자 그 군당 호라나 타니에 딱 된다 있잖아. 이게 버진 세상에 되는 거 없다 창송아. 다 이게 비지 나는 진세지 꼭 가르세요 그거래. 세나? 그 타니 가르 군당 코 샘담 시샤 전에 군다한테 랑기 생이 주가 지금 이로 그 군당 코 랑기 생이기 주피지 랑기 생이기 예스지 말이야. 예스 진짜 여방 엄마 거랑 맞지는 그 매개지가 예스 진짜 그 나는 예스 술다 아주 실례 봐. 삼삼 깨져 되레스. 욕다 상기스 개상. 여방 엄마 짜상고 제면 예스 예스 가르잖아. 타니에 딱 된 세잖아. 이봐 예스 됐지만 예스. 콜라 가르치는 예스지 특수시대 삼무실래 그랬어. 요소 가르치는 콜라 삼무 랑기 체니지 예. 시라비인다 예스 특지 수지 삼무 그날 예스지 삼무실래 그랬어. 근데 로라고 로라 야야 요타래.
나리
프랑스 예스에 그 용 뭐가 생기어 말이야. 로라 예스에 용 뭐가 생기어 말이야. 그냥 그런 콜라 요소시 삼무당. 좋은 걸 고알라 하지 요소 삼다 요방 뭐가 생기어 말아. 요방 뭐가 제수 로로 야가 야가. 코마지나요. 라지 예스면 요소지 삼게. 이거 또 코드 잡고 싶네. 여봐 타니 딱 된선에서는 이봐 예스 맞지 말이야. 예스 맞지 말이야. 랑기 체니기 예스 시비 요소지 축구를 먹고 수루지를 내봐 이제 이 태어나마 좋고 나디 녹탄 상기 진대지 감사.
You have to do some like gymnastics to get to the way in which this and he likes this kind of stuff. You have to get to some kind of twisting around to get it to be correct here, because he's saying one state of mind is holding that it does exist by definition, right? Does exist by definition, and that same state of mind is viewing it as existing by definition in the way that the Madhyamika explain existing by definition. And in the mind-only school, you can't do that. You can't say those two things at the same time. If you were saying it existed by definition in the mind-only school, that's a wrong state of mind. If you say it exists by definition as the Madhyamika explain it in the mind-only school, that's a correct state of mind. Because then you'd be saying that when you look for the thing that got the projection, independent of the projection, it really has existence. So if you take this on face value, this statement, that in the mind-only school, one state of mind could hold it as existing by definition, and at the same time hold it existing by definition as the Prasangika explain it, that'd be an impossible state of mind. So you can't explain it that way. So you have to look at the first half of that, where it says the mind is holding that it exists by definition, and you have to say that that state of mind is not what it sounds like. You have to concentrate on that state of mind saying this object is something that exists by definition. You see what I mean? It's concentrating on the existing part and not on the existing by definition. Okay? So when you explain this passage, when you get to this passage, that state of mind is not so much fixated on whether it exists by definition as explained by the mind-only school. That state of mind is fixated on the question of, does this thing exist or not? Okay? And then the by definition is just sort of an aside. Okay? So if you say, according to the mind-only school, can there be one state of mind that says about one object at the same time, this does exist, and it does exist by definition in the way that the Madhyamika explains it, is that okay?
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. If you kind of don't say the by definition in the first half too loud, okay, and you're concentrating on the existence part and not the by definition part, you know, because here it's a little bit different. The wording is not quite by definition. They left out a syllable. It doesn't say Rankitseniki Yopa, it says Rantsenki Yopa. Exists by itself. You got caught. Yeah. Okay? It doesn't say Rankitseni. It just says Rantsenki Yopa, which in philosophy means have its own existence. Doesn't mean have its own definitive existence. The definitive part got left out here. Look carefully. And there's no Tseniki, Niki. Okay? There's not there. So really the first state of mind is just saying, this thing exists. It has its own way of being, and it exists by definition as in the way that the mind and the Madhyamika explain it. That's okay. That's no problem. You got hung up on that Tsenyi Ki. Doesn't say Tsenyi Ki. Go look at it. Page 10, third line from the bottom. It just says wrong Tsenyi. That was a long syllable. Nothing. Although I have previously locked the Madhyamika door 2 or 3 times and not let you go there, now I'm going to unlock the door and we're going to sneak in there for a bit, and I'll give you an example, an illustration from the other side of that door. I'll go to the other side of that door, to that other room called Madhyamika School. I'll pick up a little illustration, since you guys had some Madhyamika teaching before, and I'll bring it back out to the Mind-Only School room, and I'll show it to you, and you'll catch it.
Pena umatanju lula pumba demba truba resha demba truba ye siji arwas ye sin thinking you lose arwas to lot jaran tang yura arwas but demba truba yore sin lot that to jaran tang yura arwas taku ye pa moma ji sam tang gi rese na ye pa sam tang mari ti ku suru khona ye zu ji ku suru khona buga lo khona ye zu yaga ji ta mare
For example, if we go to the Madhyamika room, right, and we pull out the Madhyamika belief that a water pitcher has no true existence, right, the state of mind that's looking at the water pitcher and says, right, independent of my projections, right, this water pitcher has no true existence, that's a wrong state of mind. That's not a correct state of mind. But in one sense, it's a correct state of mind because it is attributing to a vase existence. It is attributing to the pitcher some existence. In one corner of that state of mind is a little sliver of state of mind that's saying this thing exists.
Because you're saying it does truly exist?
Yeah, because it says it does truly exist. When a wrong state of mind says about a water pitcher, this thing exists truly, there's a sliver of correctness about it because somewhere in that state of mind is thinking that the water pitcher exists. So from that state of mind, very good example. He says, very good example for understanding this particular line. Okay. He's not correct about the mode of its existence, but it's correct about its existence. So it's got a little correctness in it. You better take that illustration and carry it over here to this sentence, or else you're going to be in trouble. You're going to have to use that illustration and park it over here in this sentence and use what you learned from that illustration here, or you're going to be in trouble. That's just an illustration I'm trying to give you so you can take it over to the Mind-Only School and try to understand it better. For example, I think I got it straight. There's somebody doing their Om Mani Padme Hums. They're doing a rosary of Om Mani Padme Hums, and they're doing it kind of quick. They're Om Mani Padme Hum, Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani. And somebody else looks at them and might say, they're not doing it very sincerely, or they're not doing very well, right? It's a good state of mind or a wrong state of mind. It's actually a wrong state of mind. But somewhere in that state of mind is the perception that this person is reciting Om Mani Padme Hum. So from that point of view, he is perceiving that the person is reciting Om Mani Padme Hum, and he's correct. He's incorrect in his assumption about the other person's state of mind, about how they're doing their Om Mani Padme Hum. But there's a sliver of correctness about his state of mind, even as he thinks this person's not serious about their Om Mani Padme Hum. These are just illustrations that are similar to this other case. When we get to philosophical conundrums in the text, we gotta approach them and we gotta resolve them. And this is one way of resolving this particular hassle in this particular book. This book is famous for having these very, very difficult statements in it. And you have to wrestle with them and come to some kind of conclusion like this. You can't go up to a work by the great glorious Jetsun Kappa and say, oh, it looks like he made a slip here, you know, he made a boo-boo here. You must approach it from the point of view of he's correct, he's trying to teach us something, and what is it we're supposed to realize here? You've been sitting here for 2.5 hours, you better stop here, you guys are going to die. Okay, so we'll leave it there and we'll come back later. Okay. You ready, Alina? Then leave quickly, smoothly, cleanly. That's a custom, okay? Idam Guru Rana Mandala Gamyatayami Adi Kewakun Sanami Shi Tozoshin Sanami